The internet can only handle so many bright colors at once. I think I'm using up your quota too.
AI is really beneficial to those processes because you are accumulating knowledge.
The information gathering is maybe the easiest to sort of think about how AI would fit in.
I love going to clients and, articulating a vision, being strategic, solving new and hard problems. Hey, David, how are you?
Peter, good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you on this wonderful day?
Good. It's hard to believe that as we're filming this, it's almost the end of July, 2025. That's the summer is going fast.
I have no idea where it's going, but you appropriately wear a total opposite of what I wear. My bland white. You got the colorful aloha shirt on.
I figure if I get
could
lost
find you in a crowd
jungle,
very easily, huh?
Yeah. If I get lost in a jungle, maybe I have a little bit of camouflage. If you get lost above the Arctic Circle, you'll be camouflaged.
Yeah, I would totally blend in the Arctic Circle with this outfit on, please. I got up my game over here, man. I'm looking pretty pathetic against you. It's really kind of bad. I don't know why.
The internet can only handle so many bright colors at once. I think I'm using up your quota too.
I agree. Anyway, well, welcome back to Call Me Data. I mean, another incredibly awesome podcast by you and I should say.
Yep. And today's going to be a fun one. We've taken a look at the impact of AI on a couple of other industries in the past, right? We talked about the legal profession. We talked about software development and outsourcing. And I guess we're going to turn the lens on ourselves today, right?
Yeah, no, most definitely. But I want to lead it with a couple other things that are totally, I think different than the actual topic. Real quick stuff that some of it I garnished this morning when I was, just catching up on my reading. Some of it that goes through my head when I was driving 700 miles yesterday. But I know, insanity. But one of the things I actually came across in a journal this morning, which is sort of tangentially, I guess, related to what we're going to talk about, is there was an article in the in a journal, and it was something that had come up in another conversation on a board that I sit on earlier in the week, which was the impact of AI on graduates, recent graduates, and how there is quite the decline in graduates getting employment out of school. And it was interesting to see the real impact and how that's actually increasing long term, what that impact is going to be on. And when I've spoken about this, I think many times, what the impact is going to be on new grads and new employees and just all that in general.
I saw that article too, and it's I have to say I'm surprised that it's happened so quickly. Like, my interpretation of what's happening is a lot of companies are sort of slowing down hiring and sitting on the fence because they're just not sure about how many more, humans they're going to need to hire versus deploying agents and bots. But what caught me off guard is they're acting very quickly in this. In other words, these companies that are slowing down hiring, most of them don't have wide distribution of agentic computing. They don't have AI doing the jobs of people. So they're slowing down hiring now in anticipation of something that, to be honest, I don't think they even understand how or when they're going to do it and what it will look like when they get there.
Oh, I absolutely 100% agree with you. This is certainly putting the cart before the horse. I think, look, the areas where they probably are seeing value and where maybe it's more legitimate is in some of the engineering functions of software development, where there are real gains that you can actually measure. And I think that's, for some of the firms, clearly some of the tech firms, they're certainly doing that. But that is it. Look, face reality, software engineers out of top schools are expensive. I think it's well deserved. Let me be clear. I think it is well deserved because these are really hard professions to be in. But those are the ones, given that they are higher cost, I think are going to get hit first, especially when.
I agree. I'll sort of modify what I said too, because I do understand why companies would start taking action now to reduce hiring if they're hiring primarily software engineers, right? We are seeing a very tangible and real impact on software development lifecycle with AI. So yes, I get it. And it's interesting too, because what it also means is if you look at the way most companies hire, and this is not, I don't think, unique to software engineers, it's across the spectrum, right? You hire people along maybe a bell curve. You might shift the bell curve left or right depending on your job. But the point is, you're going to hire some A+ new hires and some A's and some A minuses all the way down. And in other words, you're going to have a blended team. And so, there was always a way for a B average software engineer to find a job.
Right. Exactly.
I could see that changing, right? Like, I think that companies are going to hire only the A and A plus software engineers because, to your point, there is no current replacement for a very skilled software engineer, but
right.
it's the A minuses and downward that are going to be easily taken out and replaced with coding agents.
So, interesting, though. I know. I'm trying to formulate my thought here. Interesting thought. I think that's true. I think that's true I'll say in the shorter term. I think over the longer time horizon, and again, hypothetical thinking, projecting out. Given that you and I think both believe that the advent of these tools is going to increase the amount of work that can get done, that over time, you're still going to need to backfill those jobs and you're still going to require the B's and the C's in the door. And given that the agents and the tools have gotten so sophisticated, you can take a B player and you can make them in many ways, I wouldn't say be an A player, but they can certainly take on the qualities of an A software developer.
Okay.
So
all right.
That's my thought. Maybe I'm wrong. Don't know.
No, I think I'm willing to buy that. But it's maybe one thing we'll see though is where will those, say, B grade software developers who, get amplified into an A because they're using AI, where will they work? Will they work in an IT department, or will they be the citizen developers working in a business organization of tomorrow?
Right.
That's the other interesting question.
No, I think that's a fair point. You're absolutely correct. And I mean, the interesting thing, though, is the article, this is not cutting across just software development. It's cutting across, I think, a wider swath of individual, of jobs that are out there. And what is the broader impact going to be, certainly in the short term, for those that are coming out of universities, and what do they do? And, it's like when I'm asked, from a college grad, what do I do? I'm like, always diversify your experience, diversify what you're learning. Don't focus on one thing. I mean, that's going to give you some longevity. But I actually don't really have a lot of great answers, and I think it's remains to be seen what this is all going to turn into.
It's going to come full circle. The most valuable, and I say this only quasi tongue in cheek, the most valuable major might turn out to be philosophers. In other words,
kidding aside,
that's the one thing that humans still do currently, at least, that AI is not able to do, right? We think creatively, constructively, we ponder the meaning of life around us, etc. Maybe the path forward for students will be to be a little bit of a philosopher, be a generalist in some way with broad knowledge and the ability to link ideas.
Right. Well, so you bring up an incredible, I think, valid point, where most curriculums these days, and even back when I took my engineering curriculum and science curriculum, I took very little in the way of liberal arts. Now, naturally, I read a lot. I read a lot of anyway, so I've self-taught a lot of different things that I didn't learn in school, including philosophy, and read lots of literature. I was always keen on diversifying my background, but that's not taught in college inherently. Most curriculums don't capture that. They don't cover liberal arts, and liberal arts, I think, programs for years have just been I don't say not well invested in, but it's not part of a core engineering. And I really think now more so than ever, that is incredibly important to have that included, given these tools are so communications driven and English driven, and you need the capability to communicate and think well, that augmenting a engineering major with those skills is really important. What do you think? You're more of a liberal arts major than I am.
Sorry, isn't it ironic, though, that the people who are least equipped to communicate with AI models these days might be the people who actually spent their whole careers preparing to be software engineers?
It's funny, actually. I know. It comes full circle.
Yep.
Who knows what his journey is going to lead us? It's going to be interesting.
Interesting. Well, it is, back to your point on the article, I think it is a little bit interesting, and maybe it exposes broader uncertainty that we, haven't really talked about around, the impact of AI and other things on companies. But as you said, these companies are very much sort of jumping the gun in already slowing down hiring. And I don't know if it's fear-based, that they are worried that they'll be overburdened with human resources when the time comes for a big shift, or maybe it's optimism based, that they are so confident that they will be able to replace some functions of people with computers, or maybe it's just cynical. I don't know,
I don't know.
but
I think it's
I wasn't expecting to see it happening so quickly.
it was. I mean, I think it's a bit myopic, honestly. I've seen this in the past, and not because of AI, but you and I have worked in finance, and we've always seen the hire and fire cycle go on and on. It's usually when they think things are going to get bad, even before they get bad, they start laying people off in droves, and then they subsequently next quarter rehire everybody again. So I
Well,
feel like this is a bit myopic.
yeah. And look, I think that's a really good point you make, for a whole bunch of reasons which are way beyond the scope of our podcast, right? Corporations have the upper hand right now in that, and they can hire and fire at will, right? They can shed employees and still have no trouble going back out and hiring employees back next year. And
Right.
so it's something that, for a lot of reasons, societal and otherwise, it wasn't something that corporations did 40 or 50 years ago. They had a more of a lifelong contract, but now these companies are in the position of, effectively, there's very little downside for them to preemptively shed employees, because they can always go hire them back again, or people like them again.
Yeah.
Well, and you wonder why
Yeah.
people are cynical about big corporations. Not to be,
Yeah.
you and I worked in big corporations for decades, but you wonder why people are cynical, especially the young new graduates. And I think there's a lot of merit in that, given that they don't really embrace them anymore. They don't take them in and treat them like long-term employees. It's like you said, churn and burn.
Well, and maybe that's a great segue into our topic for today, because if you're not hiring young employees and nurturing them, grooming them, training them, etc., we just said that, like, most companies, even if they deploy AI agents heavily, there's still going to be a job for human oversight,
Right.
human judgment,
Right.
the experts in the room. Where are those experts going to come from 10 years in the future if these companies have never hired junior entry-level people and brought them up through the system and turned them into the experts?
Right.
That's
Right.
That's the part that is still, I think, unanswered for most organizations.
No, I think it's a great segue into what we're going to talk about today, and it's really around. And you and I had obviously spoken last week about just the implications of artificial intelligence on some of the traditional consulting models, which I think leads into what we're actually doing in a lot more detail, which is building a true from the ground up AI consulting firm, where we think we can have a significant advantage over traditional models because we don't have the overhead and all the additional costs of a traditional model. If we truly look at everything through lenses of artificial intelligence, and can we use AI as opposed to putting individuals or humans on the job?
So I think let's start with that. Like, what does it really mean? Because I think when a lot of people hear, AI and consulting firm, they think of some of the, well publicized and written about examples of large consulting firms that have built their own internal AI models, and they've given AI to their consultants as a tool, right? And we've seen the studies that showed that there actually were some fairly material productivity improvements and even performance improvements amongst the consultants using AI actively. So, like, that's a playbook that's been proven already, is, hey, give your consultants access to an AI tool that is trained on or grounded in past deliverables and methodologies of your firm. But I think you're talking about something deeper than that, right? Okay.
Much deeper.
Define it. What is it?
And I think, you know what, I'm actually going to throw this one back to you. And the reason I'm going to throw it back to you is because when you and I had a discussion about this last week, and you had a way of articulating this, I think, which was quite elegant and eloquent. And I know because it's early in the morning, you're still drinking coffee, you're probably going to forget, but you had a way of articulating, I think, very clearly what we're building and how we're building it, and the real true difference between a traditional model and a real AI-centric model. So,
I'll take a stab at it. I probably won't remember what I said a week ago, but Yeah, when I think about this AI native concept, it's this. It's that, traditional consulting and applying AI revolves around using AI to help the humans who are the consultants perform better. But there's a fundamental flaw in that, which is that in most organizations, the real expertise, the real intellectual property and the value is concentrated in a few humans who sit at the top of that pyramid structure consulting organization. And almost every organization I've ever worked with would be delighted if they could just have access to that expert. But they can't, because it's just not economically feasible for that expert to be available to them and make it work in the consulting model.
Right.
They need to, take a much larger bite out of the pyramid and get lots of other people involved.
Right.
So the vision of a true AI native consulting organization is that what you actually do is a couple of things. You're using AI to sort of amplify and almost clone the capabilities of those small number of experts. You're creating the ability for companies to interact directly with the knowledge that those human experts have without having to filter it through all the layers of other less experienced consultants. Right? You're directly tapping into that intellectual property and that knowledge. And you're doing that because effectively that expert can be multiple places at once through the magic of AI agents that are trained to do things like that expert would do them.
Right. I think that is a good definition. I like that.
It probably needs a few fewer words than I used, but hopefully it got
No,
the
I
point
think
across.
I think it articulates the point really well, and I think this is what we're trying to build. And our whole philosophy is AI first. And I think when you look at a traditional organization, it's still people first, to AI second. And you're starting to see, obviously, some companies flip that on their head because of not hiring. But I think that's really, if you look at it, it's, can we do this first with artificial intelligence before we actually engage with an expensive human? And hopefully get consistent, better results quicker than you would in the past. And, fix some of the traditional problems with people. People can be, in fact, problematic. That's part of the goal with this.
Yep. Yeah, no, and it's, the nice thing about it is, agents are certainly not going to replace people, right? I'm not suggesting that we are talking about a consulting firm full of robots and no humans, right?
No.
There is very much a role for the people, and I can't imagine any scenario in which any client would want to interact only with agents.
Right.
But it's sort of using the people more effectively, using the people to provide oversight and human judgment, not to do all of the other things that are more heavy lifting oriented, and maximizing the value you get out of their time. So, yeah.
What would that, let's give, I think examples are always, great at bringing some of this home. Like, what would that look like in a real world scenario? Where traditionally you might have had one of the larger consulting firms engage, and maybe that engagement model costs, I don't know, 5, 10, $15 million to do something that's fairly, I won't say easy, not easy, but involves a lot of people, a lot of touch points, looking at data, looking at documentation, and all that kind of stuff. But what would that look like?
Good question. Let's take one of the stock in trade of the consulting industry. Let's take some form of assessment, right? Doesn't really matter what kind of assessment it is, because, consultants do assessments and formulate recommendations on a wide variety of topics. So let's take an assessment. When I break down an assessment, there's really three primary phases to it. And these overlap a little bit, so it's not necessarily always clean cut. But let's, for the sake of argument, say there's three activities that happen. The first is information gathering. The second is formulation of recommendations, observations, recommendations.
Right.
And the third is some sort of follow-up, because, again, you're not doing an assessment in a vacuum. You're doing an assessment because you want actionable recommendations to improve something. And so, in theory, you want to go back and demonstrate or measure how much it has improved. So, information gathering, formulation of observations and recommendations, and then reassessment or monitoring. So, I guess let's talk about the role of AI in each of those phases, because it sort of is slightly different in each of those phases.
Right. No, let's walk through that. And I think again, this is what we're trying to build going forward.
Yep.
So let's
So, here's the interesting thing. If you look at, I think the information gathering is maybe the easiest to sort of think about how AI would fit in. Typical information gathering phase during an assessment is a small team of consultants scheduling meetings, scheduling interviews, running around an organization, meeting with a lot of different people, and basically asking them, look, I'm not going to insult them by saying they're asking them a canned list of questions. They're not. They're engaging them in a discussion, but they have a list of things they're trying to draw out, a list of topics to explore. That activity, here's some challenges. One, it requires a certain trained level of consultant to do that, right? To have an engaging discussion with someone means that you've got some understanding of the background, the information. Two, even if you have a team of 4 or 6 or 8 or 10, doesn't matter how big the team is, you're still going to be somewhat resource constrained. Each of those consultants can do one meeting at a time. They can't be in 3 places at once.
Right.
So, and I think the third is, how do you gather all that information and standardize it? Different people are going to have different ways of interpreting what someone says. They're going to be taking, unless they're recording the meeting, they're going to be taking notes. They're going to be recalling their observations, and human recall's imperfect.
Right.
So you've got all these challenges. This one, to me, is a very straightforward application of AI technology, because we know that we can develop AI virtual personas that can have interactive conversations with people, and that can be developed with some of our knowledge in them and some of our framework about what we want, what topics we want them to explore. And they can adapt to the conversation. They can know, for example, that if the person identifies as a member of technical staff, they're going to ask more questions about these topics than those topics, right? So, I think there's a very natural fit for using agents to literally do interviews with people in a variety of formats and gather information. They can do telephone interviews. They can do video interviews. You can allow someone to just record a monologue on audio video and send it to you with their thoughts. You can correspond over email or messages. You can extract information from documents. So these agents can really, I have to say multimodal, because that's
they are
the right name, but they can operate across a variety of modes and really do a great job at harvesting and synthesizing information.
But the foundation of this is, so you and I together have, I don't know, roughly 70 plus years of experience, obviously decades that we can encode into a model, either through one of the variety of methods, but that really is the beginnings of it. That's the foundation of it, because like you said, you need experts that can walk into a meeting and ask the right questions. And you and I have this corpus of information that we can encode into a model, podcasts, books, reading, all the stuff that we speak about, and include that. So when we walk into a meeting, or this agent, we have this, we can now deploy an agent that we've trained, maybe in a Docker container or something like that, that can interact with some of these users while, gathering other information and requirements and generate an output. So you've basically taken a Peter and David or any other expert, you've deployed it at a location rather quickly, because you're deploying a container or something along those lines, and you can now you have a very smart agent operating on our behalf. Now, of course, we oversee it, but it's doing a lot of the legwork, a lot of the time-consuming stuff for which a traditional consulting firm would actually bill for. And that's kind of what we're talking about, and building around that type of a model.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And what you described is what is effectively the moat here, right? It is our defense. And this is, I want to be very clear, like, you can't take an off the shelf model and say, go interview these people on this topic and expect to get valid results. The secret sauce is how you can introduce your knowledge, your framework of thinking about the problem, your types of follow-up questions you want to ask, etc., into the model. So the model is interviewing someone the way you would, or the way that a more junior consultant trained by you would.
And I think the beauty of this is, so if we walk into an organization, and obviously, look, there are times you can incorporate it into, we'll call it the Peter and David model. That'll be the deployable model. But there are times when you're walking into an organization where obviously privacy is incredibly important to them. Finance, for argument's sake, they're not going to they're not going to speak into a generally available model and have it used in the Peter and David model and that information encoded. But you can then take their information as part of this process, especially for repeatable uh, things that happen year after year after year, included in their model. Which, so now you're actually over time, you're kind of getting a sense of changes over time, and you're really using that uh, over time, and you're keeping the information that you have. This is the beauty of all this. Consulting firm comes in, charges you, I don't know, $500, $1,000 an hour. Next year, they have to do the same thing again. They're doing it all over again, most of the time starting almost from scratch, charging the same amount of money and doing it again and again and again. And when you can keep that information, just first off, you can do it continuously, but more importantly, you can actually have a real snapshot of what you did last year and then score yourself based on that.
Yeah. So let's then look at sort of, step 2 in this, right? The synthesis and the generation of recommendations. Cause I think that's where, it also gets maybe a little more challenging, but very interesting, which is how do you then take use AI models to take all this content that you've collected, all the observations, the transcripts of meetings with people, etc. And how do you start to generate observations or recommendations, right? And again, it's probably harder than it first looks when you start peeling back the layers, because a generic off-the-shelf model is going to make some generic off-the-shelf observations, and the recommendations will be not very useful, right? So what we really need to do is, again, use models that understand or are grounded in our approach, our methodology, previous recommendations we've made, even understanding, if I've got 3 observations, there's a significant editorial component to deciding which one do I bring out first, which one's the most important one of these things. I think these models over time, based on continuous retraining based on our final deliverables, start to learn that and start to exhibit, we'll say, some judgment about how to sequence things and what priority to assign to things, and even what sorts of recommendations to draft.
Right. Well, I mean, I think this is a couple of things. I think you're absolutely correct, because over time, look, again, a lot of this becomes repeatable. I mean, customers are buying expertise, and as our expertise gets encoded, clearly it's reusable at other clients. And I think you had said it once, clients are buying capabilities, and that's really the important thing. And, we're taking our capabilities, you and I, and our experience and any other experts we ultimately bring on board, and we're encoding their knowledge, and we're going to make sure that it's highly scalable. No longer do I have to employ, there's only 24 hours in a day, and there's only so many hours in a day that Peter and David can work, that now being able to deploy a model that represents us to another location allows us to be far more scalable than we otherwise would be.
Absolutely.
And it adheres more towards our values and our principles and how we want to put forward, how we look to the clients.
So, I would even argue somewhat counterintuitively that by leveraging AI correctly, we can put more of our personal attention on client deliverables than we might have been otherwise. Like, I have experienced this myself, where if I leverage AI to help consolidate notes and findings and draft out something according to a structure that I've already provided it, right? I can spend my time really more thinking critically about, are these the right recommendations? Have I articulated the reasoning behind this one clearly? Have I explained the pros and cons of this decision clearly, right? It allows me to focus on the part of that capability that I bring to the table, right? Because to your point, if someone's hiring they're not hiring my typing capability. They're not hiring my note-taking capability.
They're hiring your brain.
Right. They're hiring my insight, my analysis, and my wisdom gained over an unmentionable number of years of working. And I say it that way because you said a little while ago that we had something like 70 years of combined work experience or Excel experience. And at first I was like, wow, do we even have 70 years of life experience? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess we do.
Way more than that.
Clearly we've passed it. Yeah. I think sometime when you hit 50, you get to the point where, like, you used to be able to, like, hey, I have this many years of work experience. And now you're like, I have that many years of work
It isn't my
experience.
work
It just,
experience, and this many years of
yeah,
life experience, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's like,
no,
as I
that was a
tell my
little
kids,
jarring to hear.
yeah, I know. We won't go into the amount of life experiences we have. We'll leave that one out.
No,
It's not necessary to talk about that one.
nope.
Uh,
All right. So yeah. And then why don't we, do you want to take the third phase, sort of the monitoring and reassessment and things? Cause you were starting to talk about that a few minutes ago. This
yeah,
leave
no, I think
behind
this.
concept is really
No,
neat.
I think. Yeah, no, I think this is an important point to make, and I think one that goes. And it's counterintuitive. Well, like I say, for a traditional consulting model, it's kind of the moat around them in some ways, because once you're brought in the door, you typically will be brought in again and again and again, especially for compliance or regulatory issues or those things that come up every single year. Maybe it's financial assessment, whatever it might be. And those repeatable type processes are really, I think, beneficial to AI is really beneficial to those processes because you are accumulating knowledge. And it's funny because I remember decades ago we used to talk about the knowledge economy and how we're going to have all this information. It's going to be stored in all these places in an organization, and you're going to reuse it, and it's going to be used, and you're going to. And it never happened because it was virtually impossible to use all this unstructured information. 99.99% of it sat on SharePoint. Or some other platform for the files that you created last year that were so deeply embedded in 47 different layers of a directory structure that you can never find it, and the search engines can never find it because they were terrible. Now with AI and the tools, searching for this information has become phenomenally efficient to get and accumulate it and use it over time. And I think,
And I have to step in with a funny story on knowledge, because back in the late 1990s, one of the smartest people I've ever worked with, my friend John, said to me, knowledge management is
I
like,
know.
this is the future. This is where things are going. He really convinced me, and he was right, but he was also decades ahead of his time,
Yeah.
because, you
Yes.
know, absolutely a lot of organizations saw the value of some formalized knowledge management process, but it just never worked. It
Now,
was too high friction. It required people to spend too much time organizing and filing their output and preserving things intentionally. And it just, it always felt like it was in conflict with the just get the work done ethos. So
100%.
yeah. So 30 years later, maybe knowledge management enabled by AI is finally going to have its moment.
I do think we've hit that inflection point. I do. It's funny because I look. You and I grew up in this world, and every single tool out there, we're going to organize our knowledge, and it's going to get better, and yada yada yada. And how many times have you gone to a SharePoint or any internal search engine and searched for a document and have gotten links to 500 different documents that were utterly irrelevant to what you were actually looking for?
Every
Um,
time.
Exactly. So all you're doing is wasting a lot of storage space and spending a lot of money on storing 47 versions of documents that were completely useless. I do think, I think, I mean, I think you think as well, with the modern set of tooling uh, and AI, you can actually finally use a lot of this information efficiently and include it into your output. So I think having a true learning organization is now truly possible, and making it repeatable year after year after year, I think, is even more important. So I mean, just
So
imagine.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I want to get back into the repeated year after year. So let me tee it up, just to kind of ground us on the assessment process, right? As you said, there is a real value for a lot of organizations in having a reassessment done by the same organization that did the assessment, right? It might be a semi-annual or an annual thing designed to measure progress. And because all assessment benchmarks are going to be somewhat subjective or somewhat colored by the organization
Right.
doing the work, right? They tend to be sticky for consultants. Like, if I have you assess me, it's going to be more effective for me to have you reassess me later, because you'll be able to have the same frame of reference. So it's a little bit of an annuity of sorts for some consulting firms, that they can get brought in time after time to reassess organizations. I saw this in the data management space years ago. Consulting firms who were doing various forms of data management assessments, and there were a couple of different standards out there. They would get brought back. In one case, I worked for an organization that hired the consultants every 6 months to do a
I
rescoring
know. It's crazy.
on their data management capability model. And it was insane. All right. So How do we solve that with an AI native consulting approach?
So us, good old all on data, would help you solve that, I think, in a more practical fashion. And I think part of it goes to using these tools quite extensively throughout the entire process, anywhere from, project managing the project to having, AI questionnaires that are driven off of your responses and ask you subsequent questions that we then capture. And we capture all this information. We also would include any requirements documents. We would include all relevant information, drawings, whatever, Visio diagrams. We would include that into an on-premise model or on cloud model in your what do you call in your cloud environment. So we're not getting it externally, if I could speak this morning. And we're taking all that information and we're going to include it in this model. Maybe we'll create a RAG approach, or we'll include a fine-tuned model, whatever that might be. But based on that information, maybe we generate an outcome, whatever problem we're trying to solve for, it's compliance or regulatory, we'll generate the output. But we're going to take a vast amount of this information and include it into this model. And like I said, people interactions, all that's also included into it as well. And we'll guide you along in that process.
So let me give an example. I mean, I think you're 100% right. This is where I think it becomes somewhat of a game changer. So let's say for the sake of an example that we had made a recommendation to an organization that they develop a more comprehensive and consistent way of looking at responsible AI. They wanted to have a set of principles and standards and guardrails around the way that AI is designed, developed, deployed, monitored, etc. And assuming then that we also help them develop that set of guardrails, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what you could do under the traditional consulting model is you could have someone come back periodically and try to measure, are you actually doing what you set out to do? Are you applying this framework consistently to your AI projects? That would require going back through a set of historical documents, whatever had happened since that recommendation was made, and reviewing them and saying, okay, did this really happen?
Right.
Imagine, here's the alternative, and I love this. Imagine instead that what you could have is a leave behind consultant, a consultant who sits there and reads every single project initiation document, every minutes package of your AI governing body, every policy document, you name it, right? But has access to a set of information. And reads them all day and just sits there and reads all these things, studies them, interprets them, and compares them to your goal, compares them to your AI principles, your standards, your control frameworks, and immediately raises their hand and says, wait a minute, something's wrong here. This project, there's no evidence that they followed principle number 13. That's missing from the documentation. Right. And if that agent could do this all day and all night, well, I just said agent. So that consultant, the punchline I gave away is that consultant can be an AI agent.
Yes.
We can leave behind an agent that continues the work we started and provides continuous assessment. So we go from reassessment to continuous real-time assessment of how you're doing.
Right, exactly. And that's the critical part of this. And now it's always, we say in engineering, it's always critical to find problems before they become in design phase as opposed to the build phase. Same with this. It's, I'd rather find problems when they occur rather than a year from now when I'm doing my reassessment. And then the cost of remediating those problems goes through the roof as opposed to catching it at the very beginning of the pipeline. And that's the critical thing here. And running an agent in a cloud environment 24/7 over the course of a year is probably going to cost you less than $1,000. Whereas having human beings sitting there doing this day in and day out, not even 24/7, just a workday, is going to cost you $1 million. That's the critical piece of information. And it's a game changer in that respect. And that takes more than AI awareness or, knowing how to use AI tools. That takes a deep fluency in artificial intelligence and actually making it truly, truly, truly benefit an organization. And that's where you and I come in.
No, I think it's clearly to me the way of extending the value that people get from advisory and consulting engagements. And, that was one example, but like to your point, for a modest cost, you could deploy a small army of specialized agents doing different things, monitoring or even advising on different things. Like, again, imagine an AI agent that is grounded in your work experience and my work experience that is part of the review panel when a company is reviewing proposals for AI investment. Imagine, that instead of you and I having to physically read them and sit around the table, we could do it, but we're only two people and it would be expensive, etc. Imagine we had an agent that was, trained on our brains
Right.
that could be part of the review committee and could ask questions and offer comments that would be the same questions and comments you and I would offer if we were there in the room
Right.
reading the deliverables.
Right. No, exactly. And I think that's important. And having these agents is obviously less expensive, but it also, I think, an important point is every decision is data informed. They are self-learning and repeatable over time. So we use the output to augment what we have, and it becomes a repeatable process and obviously self-learning. And if somebody comes in and replace Peter and David or not, whatever it may be, or these agents get continuously updated, um, there's a massive amount of benefit to that to any organization. Um, it's not done, forget, let's repeat next year and spend the first 2 months relearning what we forgot from doing it last year.
And that's a good point. The underlying, the initial value is that these agents have elements of our experience embedded in them. But the real persistent value is what you said earlier. It's the AI capability and the know-how to build this in the first place in a way that it might be your brain and my brain contributing the first part, but years down the road, you want to be able to instill and incorporate the expertise of many other people into this approach.
Right.
So it's that building the platform that allows you to do this is where the value is. And it's not your brain and my brain. It's I can take anybody and I can, over a period, hopefully a compressed period of time, I can have models learn from those people and those experts by ingesting virtually everything they've ever written, said, done, thought, or spoken. And continue to scale the knowledge of this virtual consulting organization. That's the value, I think.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely spot on.
So it's funny because it's really a technology play under the covers, right? Like we're saying it's consulting, but there's a big technology play that we are delivering here too, I think.
No, you're virtually, you've read my mind, because that's exactly where I was going with this. I mean, I think you're right. Yes, we're starting it out as a totally AI driven firm using the tools, but rapidly morphs into a real heavy duty tech play, because it has to be. You have to build the tools to do all this and actually make it a highly repeatable process over time.
No wonder I never know how to answer when someone asks me what I do for a living.
We have one now. We have a good one.
Yes.
A really good one now. But it's been an evolution for everybody. It's been an evolution for us to kind of get to, really do this in a way that we think is scalable, and it just becomes a really good business model. That's a repeatable business model that can grow over time. I think you and I never wanted to do the traditional consulting model, because it's always a go for the next project, and I had, done this 25 years ago when I had a consulting firm, and it always bothered me. I'm always going for the next project. And I didn't like that. I like to build a asset that grows over time and is repeatable over time. And I think you and I have really come to a conclusion that this is the way to do this, to build a highly repeatable process, coupled with a lot of technology, coupled with a lot of knowledge, to make it a very repeatable process that we can grow rapidly.
I've always felt like I love consulting. I despise the consulting business.
Right? Yes. And I think this brings it together in a way, because I'm 100% with you. I'm the same way. I love going to clients and, articulating a vision, being strategic, solving new and hard problems. Like, I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. I get bored rapidly. But this is a way for us to go into, and you and I, we've touched on a whole bunch of different domains, things that you and I never would have in a million years even thought about interacting with, from travel agencies to car companies, like things that I never even imagined dealing with. And I think now you and I can do that on a greater scale and really get the benefit of, all this experience that we've got, putting it into these models and growing and continuing to apply our knowledge to all these various different businesses in a way we could never do it before.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. And I feel like, to your point, we didn't set out to do it the way we are doing it now. We set out to do some form of consulting work, but I guess being true to our AI first principles, right? We realized that a lot of what was frankly icky about the way the consulting industry works could be improved by judicious use of AI. And also I'll say that, like, I think we were in a position to do this because we were starting with a blank sheet of paper. We didn't have 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 existing consultants who were at risk of being cannibalized by our efforts to do things in a different way. We had the freedom of, hey, like, what could we do unencumbered by traditional constraints, I think.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely correct. It was funny. I came across, I think it was a Harvard Business Review article, and it was about innovation. And it was really about how humans, just in general, will continue to do the same thing over and over again. And innovation is incredibly difficult for them to do, especially in an existing organization. That they really, their mind is like, well, I've always done it this way, continue to do it this way, no matter what. So change is incredibly, incredibly hard. Whereas starting from scratch like we are, I think makes it easier for us to compete, and we don't have the burden of legacy. And I think that goes a long way in helping us build a consultancy that's really truly AI driven from from bottom up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. And it's, that whole innovation is such a fascinating topic, right? Like, I think that the other interesting challenge around innovation is that I feel like there's a good time and a bad time to be innovative. The bad time to be innovative is when your back is against the wall. I know there's this sort of romanticized myth about the hero of the story is in a desperate position and they innovate. They come up with some amazing, like, ingenious solution. Everyone is saved, right? But the reality is, and this is borne out by decades of research in industrial safety, in aviation, in all sorts of fields. When you're in a stressful situation, when there's an emergency, is a terrible time to innovate. It is the time to stick to established procedures, right? Human beings do not innovate well under duress.
No. 100%.
So the time to innovate is when you have the freedom from pressure, duress, freedom from an emergency, freedom from constraints. Then you can innovate thoughtfully. You can actually challenge your assumptions. You can think through the implications. It's not when you're in an emergency, when you're under duress.
No, it's the worst time to innovate. It's horrible to innovate when you're under duress and you have all these external factors driving something, taking capacity of your brain. And I think you're 100% correct. Whenever I've done things that are innovative, it was not when I had a deadline up against. I had to do it, when I had the freedom to think and let my mind go all over the place and let it coalesce slowly around something and bring together a lot of data points. And it goes back to, and this is again totally different. Like, if you look at most Nobel Prize winners in science, most of them are under 30 years old. And what does that tell you? It tells you because they are really free from the constraints of family and life yet, and where their brains can do the type of really difficult things otherwise you can't easily do. And, it's been a journey for you and me in assessing and thinking and reevaluating and coming to different conclusions over and over and over again, to where we finally came to a model we think is a growth model, a really good growth model, and not a traditional, let's go look for clients all the time growth model where we compete with everybody else. It's really something we're going to be different. We're going to come at it from a different angle. We're going to attack your problem differently. We're going to execute your problem differently. And we're going to just completely different model than everybody else. Because I don't want to compete with I do want to compete with them, but I want to compete with them in a different game than they're used to.
And I think what's, if we think farther ahead, what's really interesting is, this technology play to enable consulting and advisory. And I keep using the word advisory because I want to also say that this does not only limit itself to providing expertise from outside consultants into an organization. I see a lot of organizations who hire consultants not because they don't have enough in-house expertise, but because the people who have the expertise required to look at an area are so resource constrained, they just can't do it. They don't have enough of those people, right? So an organization could basically leverage their own experts and extend their own experts' reach
Right.
through the same play
Right.
that we're talking about, right? So I think there is a lot of legs on this. But look, I think the big takeaway from this conversation for me is that you're telling me I should just give up on my dreams of winning a Nobel Prize because 30 is a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a very long time ago.
Well, the good news is I don't think I ever had a shot at a Nobel Prize in anything, so the letdown isn't too bad right now.
I tell some people, I wish I was in my 20s again. But the caveat to that is I wish I was in my 20s with the knowledge that I have today, not the knowledge that I had when I was in my 20s. That's what I wish. Unfortunately, that unless we could figure a way to defy physics, that is unfortunately never going to happen.
Yep.
But I keep
Yep.
dreaming.
You want the energy of youth and the wisdom of old age combined.
110%. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Yep. And there's an old not curse, but a put down that says, that person has the energy of old age and the wisdom of youth.
I have not heard that one. That's a good one. Oh, David, I think I want to say we beat this horse quite a bit, and I'm sure we can go on and on because I know this really is the beginning of a long journey for you and me. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Exciting one.
it is. It's a really exciting one. I think this is going to be a fascinating journey. We started at the beginning of the conversation with the article from the journal and how companies are doing this. I think truly believe that this is going to be a radical game changer. Predicting out time horizons, I always think is a dangerous game. I think it's clear, at least to us, where it's going. The horizon is always the hard part to predict, but things are moving rapidly. And I believe firmly that, what we are doing and our approach to solving these problems is, I think, will be a game changer and make us competitive in a way that we couldn't have been against the big guys.
Yeah. And I think this is all, it's easy to sit here and make armchair predictions, right? But I think the days of large consulting firms are numbered. I don't think, they exist.
Yeah.
They're not going to go away overnight. This is going to be a gradual process. But if you offered me all the money in the world to start a traditional consulting firm today, the
No.
answer would still have to be no. It is, I won't be dramatic and say it's a dying business, but it's a business that's going to be forced to fundamentally transform. And
Right.
it's not going to look anything like it was today. And I think it's really exciting to be kind of out there experimenting with and hopefully leading some of that change.
Right. No, I agree. I think it's very hard to put a moat around the traditional business. And I mean, you're getting attacked from so many different angles that it's going to be really difficult to not undergo a massive transformation. And you and I know that those transformations are painful, hard, problematic, and certainly a lot of them fail because it's just very hard to institute cultural change within an organization. People don't like the change. It's hard. They like to keep what they're doing, and that's understandable. It's human nature. It's harder to attack. It's easier to attack it from outside the walls. It's easier to come at it from a different angle. It's easier to go after it that way. And I think for us, AI is a true force multiplier in a way that, in an incredible way. It really makes us competitive.
Yeah.
And
I think you're right. And I want to go back to the point about it is natural to resist change or natural to at least be apprehensive about change. I think it's not healthy to resist it, especially when it's irresistible, but I think it's certainly natural to be apprehensive about it. In fact, I always say that anybody who claims they love change has usually been in a position where they get to pick what kind of change they deal with, right?
Exactly.
Because you don't love change when when you feel like it's out of your control. And anyone who says
No.
they love change is lying. Some people deal with it better than others, but but there's, to your point, there's also sometimes something energizing about embracing the uncertainty and jumping in and seeing where it takes you. So,
no, I look, you and I, it's one of the reasons we started doing this at the beginning. We love the uncertainty. We love I love the change. I mean, I know it's kind of, but I like doing different things. I like keeping my brain young. And I think the way you do that is through, uh, constantly reevaluating and changing and doing things that are different, that are not the same things day in and day out. It keeps you very agile mentally. And this was our way of certainly keeping agile mentally and doing different things every single day and, applying it to things that we love. So, we
Yeah.
think this delivery model is going to be radically different.
Yeah, and I think it's going to show up in a lot of other areas besides consulting eventually. But I think this is a good test ground, a good place to start developing these capabilities.
I agree.
Well, listen,
So,
this has been a slight departure from our usual topics of conversation, but I think super
right.
interesting. And would love to hear people's feedback, thoughts, questions. Um, I don't expect everyone to think that we're doing the right thing. And, that's actually probably an encouraging sign too, right? Because if we're
Right.
doing the predictable right thing, that means we're not really like changing anything.
No, I agree. I would love for people to tell us that we're crazy because then I think we're certainly we're doing something different, which is exactly what you and I want to be doing. So,
All right. Well,
but
Peter, thank you. Good to talk to you again as always.
as always, David,
And
you have a great
thank you for
day.
joining us. Yeah, and thank you for joining us on Call Me Data.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And again, any questions, just please feel free to reach out. We love the interactions.
All right.
All
Bye,
right,
everyone.
have a
Cheers.
great day.
Thanks for watching Call Me Data. If you enjoyed our podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us on YouTube. And make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.